A dark, cloaked figure growls a command and turns away. With a malicious grin on his face, he leaves the poor damsel strapped on the railroad tracks. A laugh, like nails on a chalkboard, sends chills down the spines of his cronies. For that could only be one sound. The sound of an evil man with an evil plan. Who is this man? Clearly, he's the villain. Villains have long been entrenched in our culture. Although constantly hunted, they have survived since the dawn of time. And perhaps it is time to uncover the secret to their success. We will learn what is so intriguing about villains, what kinds of villains there are, and thankfully, where villains are most vulnerable. Many people go to see horror movies, not only for the thrill of being scared silly, but also because they are fascinated by the villain. Whether it be a stalker with a chainsaw or a hideous vampire, these characters become irresistible to us. We know so little about them, yet they play central roles in works of literature and films. We long to understand the motives behind the villain's diabolical plot, hence the monologues explaining the villain's evil plans. Villains are even arguably more interesting characters than heroes. Writers usually give the background on the hero, but it isn't always that there's a backstory on the villain. That's what creates such an attraction. The man, shrouded in mystery. The woman, nobody really knows. Our natural impulse is to be curious. But going even deeper than our fascination with villains, we have an unexplainable need for them. Psychiatrist Carl Jung once said, "The shadow is the seat of creativity." What Jung means by this quote is that we all have our own personal dark side, which he calls the shadow. And this shadow naturally comes out when we create villains. Furthermore, when reading a book or watching a movie, we subconsciously look for these characteristics in the villains that are portrayed. Actor Russell Crowe once said, "I like villains because there's something so attractive about a committed person. They have a plan, an ideology, no matter how twisted, they're motivated." This brings up another interesting point about villains. Some of us may have a grudging or even open admiration towards the commitment of a villain. There's something inspiring, yet dark, about the focus a villain has on his or her goal. Now, there are three main types of villains. Those driven by a need for power, those who have a mental flaw or quirk that makes them violent or sadistic, and a few who are only villains because of the circumstances surrounding them. The stereotypical villain is a power-driven one. These villains have only their own motives and few, if any, morals. Megatron, leader of the Decepticons, is a primary example. As a Transformer, Megatron, a disciple of the Fallen, already possesses the ability to transform into multiple different pieces of armed machinery. But he also seeks the power of the Cube and of Earth's sun, both of which give him the power of Energon. Energon being the primary life source of the planet of Cybertron, so the power of Energon has equipped enough Megatron for the planet of Cybertron to create life. You got all that? Megatron wouldn't mind destroying all of human life in order to accomplish his goal of taking over the entire galaxy. Another villain, led by his need for power, is he who must not be named, Lord Voldemort. He's a dark wizard who wants to conquer death itself. He even splits his soul to gain that ultimate power. Voldemort garners many followers, one of whom is Bellatrix Lestrange. Unlike her master, however, Bellatrix is categorized as an unstable villain. Unstable villains are sadistic, or possess an extremely violent mentality of some sort. They are hard to predict, which makes them more dangerous. Bellatrix goes out of her way to torture others, and in her opinion, lesser beings. Batman's longtime nemesis is another unstable person, albeit a clever one. He once said, "You see, madness, as you know, is like gravity. All it takes is a little push." The Joker kills on a whim, and the only person he will not kill is Batman himself. The Joker's ultimate goal is to show Gotham City that anyone can fall to his level. He turns Harvey Dent, a popular lawyer, into the dreaded Two-Face by manipulating Dent through certain tragic events in his life. Two-Face, however, isn't an unstable villain. He is, like many others, a victim of circumstance. Circumstantial villains may have been good, ordinary people, but were pushed to villainy by the situations they found themselves in. These are also the villains we may end up feeling sorry for. Gollum from Lord of the Rings is a good example. Starting his life known as Smeagol, the unfortunate hobbit fell prey to the One Ring of power, filled with menace that came from the ring. Smeagol was driven away from society for killing a fellow hobbit. With no one to care for him, or for him to care about, he became evil, and developed his alternate personality, known as Gollum. But perhaps the most well-known of circumstantial villains is Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker felt he wasn't afforded enough respect. He also desperately wanted to save his wife and future children. With that in mind, he went the only way he felt he could, to the dark side, and his new persona, Darth Vader. He became an iconic villain, a very menacing figure, and few could stand against him. In the end, however, villains aren't indestructible. They do have chinks in their armor. Sometimes these weaknesses can be hard to find, and even harder to exploit. But if you look hard enough, certain flaws tend to come through. Circumstantial villains are the easiest to deal with. For instance, Darth Vader's weakness was seeing his son, Luke Skywalker, being tortured. Dr. Seuss's Grinch is another excellent example. Isolated and left to the cold, the Grinch hates Christmas. But when he hears the joyful songs of all the who's he has robbed, his heart breaks. Well, actually it grows. Since circumstantial villains do tend to have some morals, the protagonist must find someone the villain cares about and get them to cry for the villain to return to their former selves. And sometimes, the villain does return from the realm of evil back to the realm of good. For the other two kinds of villains, insane and power-driven, the easiest way to combat them is to discover a hero. For every villain, there is a hero. For every Joker, there's a Batman. Voldemort has Harry Potter. Megatron, Optimus Prime. Captain Hook, Peter Pan. Spartans, Wolverine. Typically, the hero will target the villain's physical being, and may even end up killing them, which is the most straightforward way to get rid of a villain. Villains are ingrained in our culture. We created them to hate them, and ended up having a love-to-hate mentality towards them. There are all different kinds of villains, and all villains have weaknesses. So the next time you see that hooded figure, that mysterious shadow, or that woman strapped on the railroad tracks, remember this: the villain is something we cannot live without.